the next step is detaching all of the meshes from the rig. Because right now, if I wanted to, for instance, select the head and the upper torso of her, and I moved it around, you can see it deforms on all sides because it's still being deformed by the rig. This is being done mostly by the modifiers. You can see there is a deformation cage working on it. That is the one on the couple layers higher up. The armature is working on it. There's a subsurf modifier that's actually invisible right now. And there are a couple masks. There's even a particle layer on there. I can just remove the particle panel in this case. What you want to do is apply all of this stuff so that we have a normal mesh. The entire deformation, the pose is applied to it, and we can start editing. And the trick is, I was shown this by Sebastian Koenig very recently. You can go with Alt-C to the convert panel, and here you can convert to a mesh. Now you can convert from a curve object to a mesh. That's probably how you know this feature, if you know it at all. In this case, I just apply this bottom one, mesh from curve, meta, surf, text. It just makes whatever you have into a basic editable mesh. I will do it. All the modifiers are gone. That's perfect. I can move it around and it doesn't deform anymore. You can see the eyeball is moving oddly. That is very funky. I like it. That is because that is depending on this object. I can ignore it for now. And I'll just take a couple of things and apply them. Selecting can be a bit tricky, maybe because we can still see the rig. I don't need the rig anymore. I will just hide that layer. Then we can click on something, select it, and hit Alt-C. So we'll just take a couple of things and hit Alt-C. There we go. We can actually, this one I'll delete. She doesn't need to have that. This we will Alt-C. So the upper body stuff is now all made into meshes. This is a little joke, I think. I can just delete it. We don't need it. So we have a bunch of meshes. I can select a mesh and I can go into edit mode. And in edit mode, I can go and clean up this shape. Because we're working in an older version of Blender, we don't have all the nice new 3D print tools and overlays, the mesh analysis and such. So we have to use the old tools and pretty much common sense. If I want to look at this model, let's go into object mode. Ooh, I don't need that. I'll go into object mode and into local view, which you can find here. So in local view, I can see exactly what is wrong here, and then go into, I can already see it, it has big holes everywhere. If I want to know exactly what's wrong, we do select non-manifold or shift control alt M. Actually, I use the one in the menu because that's too many keys to do a shortcut. And all of these points show where the problems are. We're very, very lucky that Angela is very neat and makes really clean meshes, because this is not too hard to clean up. All of this stuff is just holes in the mesh. For instance, this one, all I have to do is click on the edge with Alt on my keyboard and I've got the entire edge selected. Now extrude and scale down somewhat. Can I scale down? I can crash Blender. That I can do. That's not too bad. I can just reopen Blender and reopen the file I was just in. This version of Blender, I remind you, is the one we used for the movie and was quite experimental. So I don't mind it crashing from time to time. So we go in here, I select it with Alt, I extrude and I scale down a bit. And to make sure it intersects with whatever is below there, see, ooh, something strange happens here, that's okay. I extrude again and merge at the center. And then this entire edge, you see there's something weird happening here. I think it's just making a little bit of a mess. I know what does this. See what happens? It's moving the point on the other side automatically, and I don't have any modifiers. In this file in Blender, in this version as well, is a very neat mesh options box on the left, and X mirror is enabled. This tries to keep your topology somewhat mirrored, but because I'm doing everything by hand now, I don't want it. I think Angela used it when creating the mesh. I really do not want to have that option enabled. So I've got all of this in here. This is now closed, and we just go around the mesh, extrude, merging at the center. I can do it pretty much anywhere. Extrude, maybe scale down if I want it smooth. In this case, for instance, because there are pants under here, I want to draw it down a little bit to make sure it intersects with the pants, and then merge it at the center. And the top is a little bit more complicated, but you know, if we just hold Alt, you go around clicking everywhere on these edges. I think we've got a closed loop now. I just do it again. Scale down, extrude, Alt M, and this is now closed. So if I go into mesh, what is it? No, select non-manifold. You see, no selection is made on these, so these are now manifold, all of this stuff. One thing I did want to do very much is clean up the stuff inside the mouth. You can see there's a lot of mesh stuff in here. I do not want any of that, and what I do here is you select with Alt the outer edge inside the mouth, and then do Control plus until you can see it here. Now I can just see it. That's okay. We can just see this, and I will delete all the faces. This makes a hole in here, but we can merge all of this all over the place, and we go around, just do it by hand, and close the mouth by merging the top lip with the bottom lip, and all in here as well. You just go in and you merge these points, and this is just looking at it. Those two, and merge them. That way you can close the mouth. It's a bit easier to see maybe if you put shading on flat. It doesn't influence the actual print, because for that we want to add some subsurfs anyway. So you probably want to have, well, this much detail at least. I modified this quite a lot for the printable version. Actually, I even removed the ears completely because they were covered by hair. This is really the next step in going through the model. Take every bit of the model, like the vest for instance, go into local view, and in local view you make sure it is manifold by taking a gap and you extrude it and maybe merge it at the center. This is fine. So we have this, you see it's merging towards the center, but it's intersecting with the top body. So this intersects with that. They're cutting through each other. There's nothing floating in midair. Normally a printer should be able to deal with this fine. Now, once you make everything nice and manifold, there are still a few things you probably want to tweak. In this case, a good example is the fingers. I'll take the fingers and remove them from the rest of the body, so I can just look at the fingers in local view. You see, if you're printing at this sort of size, right, this is 14 centimeters tall. I picked 14 centimeters because then I can just fit it on the platform of my own printer that I have at home, my MakerBot. And that means that a single finger is only about, well, what is it? 1 millimeter thick. So this entire finger is only 1 millimeter. And if I want to print in this type of material, the full color material, the minimum wall thickness, so the minimum width of a finger would be 2 millimeters at least. that is basically impossible to do with these fingers, or we have to give her really, really chubby fingers. Now, what I did was I made sure that both hands had the fingers stuck together like this in the shape, and it was holding something. So all we have is very small ridges on top of something that's bigger, and that really, really works. Another thing I did, and in this case it will look a little bit strange if I do it, but I'll show you anyway, is I attached them physically. So I basically took an entire edge around the finger like this, and let's see if it works. I don't need to see the subsurf really. Zoom is inverted from what it is nowadays, so I'll just use the mouse that's a little bit clearer. And so I select an entire edge and everything inside it as well. Let's see, maybe it's easier if I do it like this. There we go. So we select all of this stuff. Yep, that's okay. And we do that on the other side of the finger as well. So we go select this stuff and select that, maybe that one as well, and delete the faces. And in my case I then just merged all of these points because the fingers were next to each other anyway. We can just merge these at the center, or if you have a newer version you can bridge this gap. In this case I don't. Or you can just select like this and create faces. This way you get a closed gap between the fingers and you can fix it with your texture. And all of this stuff as well, I don't want this in my print. I don't want this point to be inside of that point. So I would go in and fix all of these points and make sure they don't intersect. And we go around closing all of these holes just to make sure that the fingers aren't too thin. I did this to a lot of stuff around the mesh. Just go around, make sure it's not too thin, make sure it's all solid, it's closed, and we go around. This is really tedious work. But if you want to make sure it's printable, it really, really helps. Because one of the problems is, especially if you use a commercial service, any one of these little tiny issues, so even this on this finger, that these 2 points are not aligned nicely, that this one is just, oh, I didn't want to hide it, I want to move it, I should be on that side. That can mean that the commercial service sends it back to you and says, hey, this isn't printable, you have to fix your model. And usually they don't go into your model and tell you exactly what all the mistakes are, because then they could just be fixing it. They just give it back to you and say, hey, there are errors. This is where the new Print 3D tools can help, but because I still want to do some baking and rendering, it doesn't quite help yet. So go around the model, make sure everything's clean, there's no intersections. If there's something really thin like the fingers, attach the fingers to each other or to the body and make really nice shapes. This took me quite a few hours to fix, to be honest. It's a lot of work.